Yeah, exactly. To sort of recap of what we were saying for those listening here, we're kind of talking about how a lot of these newer reconstructed polytheistic traditions have largely had to start from scratch. I mean, a perfect example from that is anybody doing anything Mesopotamian, ancient Sumerian, Babylonian. I mean, that's pretty much from scratch. I mean, you have to rely completely on historical records, on what we understand of the language, of physical anthropology, things like that. So certain traditions, polytheistic traditions, largely have to start from scratch, and then they go from there. But some have managed to preserve themselves in some way, like the aforementioned Afro-diasporic traditions, Afro-Caribbean traditions, that is. And some of the Germanic traditions have managed to preserve. And as we mentioned earlier, with some of the friends I've been able to talk to, there are pre-Islamic Arabian traditions that have somehow managed to survive in some way, if in a similar sense to how in Voodoo there was an adoption of Catholic saints to use as representations for the Loa. Welcome, Dustmeister.
What's going on, man?
Not too much. What about yourself?
Another beautiful day.
It's a box within a box within a box.
Boxception.
So I'm probably going to, we're looking maybe November, somewhere around there. Probably going to head out to San Francisco. Going to meet with Golden Gate Kindred and possibly go to some kind of big pagan fest type thing out there as well. We're gonna see how it pans out, but it looks like that's what's going to happen.
Good, good. I'm glad. On that subject, and particularly as it pertains to kindreds and the Satcher, one of the social groups, the discussion groups I help run, I ended up meeting two people there who are part of heathen traditions. They're fairly new to it, but quite knowledgeable in what they do know, and they were fairly local to my best friends that live out in my hometown, Tim and Patrick, who I've mentioned a couple times, as well as my friend who lives closer to me, Corey. So I managed to kind of get them together on Facebook, and we've had some group discussions and kind of just interacted a bit. I obviously had more of a chance to have one-on-one with them, but it seems like they now have the start of something that could eventually evolve into an informal local kindred for themselves.
Look at you, building a kindred for someone else's religion.
Yeah, I know.
That's very admirable.
Fuck me. There's an irony to it. It's a sort of like tragic irony because I've kind of explained this to him before. There's a lot of interest in Greek mythology. Wow, he left. So
you're a heathen in a toga.
Fair enough. Well, just for those listening, then, there's a lot of interest in Greek mythology in general. It tends to be one of the more popular of the polytheistic mythologies that exists, particularly in the West. But there doesn't seem to be much interest in practicing it traditionally. And I've discussed this with a number of people, largely over the last couple of months as I've been kind of networking a bit more and kind of hashing out details and things like that. But it seems that people have these conceptions about Greek being very rigid, ridiculously complicated, and they have all sorts of other ideas that they associate with that, they don't even bear being mentioned because they're stupid. But I think a lot of people will kind of, particularly like in the pagan community, they'll take as much as they need from Greek mythology, topically Greek, and then that's it. That's all they need. They don't go any further with that because to them it's just another archetype. They're just, here's a nice little gift bag of archetypes that I can kind of just take from. I'm not going to go in depth and actually understand them at all. Fuck it. It's kind of Apollo.
Handed out gift bags.
Well, I could kind of relate when it comes to
Hollywood Kabbalah?
No, I would say Messianic Christianity. they have all these outward trappings of Judaism, but like when you get into like the theology, you're like, oh, you're just Southern Baptist. So like, oh, you're wearing a kippah and you have a menorah, but your theology is just Southern Christianity kind of idea. So you have like this like like all the kind of like it's kitschy, but like the substance isn't there.
Yeah, I grew up with one of my best friends was his whole family was Messianic Christian, so they still went to temple, but they also went to church. They went to temple more than church, to be fair, but they sent their kids to a Lutheran school instead of any of the other options they had. And Messianic Judaism is kind of interesting because they were a weird mix, because they were Messianic Jews, but they were Reformed Jews who were now Messianic Christians. Okay, I'm actually getting my terms mixed up, but so they were Reformed Jews, orange on the Seder plate, you know, kind of thing, and strangely liberal when push came to shove. But when it came to a number of evangelical topics, they sided with evangelicals. It was kind of strange.
Well, this is like beyond statistics. This is like nearly like 100% of the times the Jews that become Christians, and especially join Jews for Jesus or the Messianic movements, are either 100% secular or come from more modern liberal sects of Western Judaism. And the argumentation always boils down to the fact that because in those sects, be they completely secular or the liberal fringes of the faith tradition, is they don't learn the text, so they don't know the arguments. You know what I mean? So like you're saying, like they have the orange on the Seder plate. They perform the Seder, but they don't understand the concept of it. So it's the same thing. Like the vast majority of any Jew who embraces Jesus as a Messiah, at least in the past 50 years or so, have been completely disenfranchised Jews. Uneducated Jews would be the best wording from their faith. So it makes complete sense. And I'm not saying necessarily that those who embrace Jesus as Messiah are uneducated, but it's just, like, statistically speaking, the Jews that do aren't from observant religious backgrounds. Well, I guess it's also a bad wording to say observant, but
They were
traditional,
they were an 80s metal family. Wow.
It's not that they were unobservant. They just weren't paying attention.
they weren't meticulous. Let's say it that way.
I liked the. Now I did Seder with them every year for a while. I think 7 years in a row, and I really liked the orange on the Seder plate. Actually, I thought it was. I liked the gesture of it. I knew that it didn't have anything to do with anything, but it was their way of making a statement about the role of women in society. It was sweet.
Yeah, whatever floats your boat.
Boats
James,
float
I
my
don't
boat.
think this is the first hangout I've been with you, which is odd because I've been in a few.
Me?
Yeah.
I mean, I come to these, but usually I sit quietly.
No, I'm saying I think this is the first one you and I have been together.
Oh, okay. I feel like we've run into each other before because I remember being.
Yeah, maybe. It's been a while, I guess. How long have the Interfaith hangouts been on now? A year?
Something like that.
Almost a year. It'll be a year
Almost a year.
probably in August or September. Because I remember one of my first... So it would have been one of the first Interfaith hangouts. It was during the holiday, the holiday of Sukkot, and I was in my sukkah. So that was probably in October or September. So it's almost a year, at least. So everyone posted it September 15th, 2014.
Now, when do you guys get big turnouts? Like, do you have to kind of organize those in advance and tap people on the shoulder and message people to get that kind of result? Or do you just generally people coming in here?
No, it depends on the week, no?
Yeah, it depends on the week. Normally, we just send out the invite and we get people, or we don't.
We've
But
had
sometimes-
really, really big ones, and we've had like 3 people.
Yeah, that's usually how it works. Because it just depends on what people are doing, if they're busy or not. Not a lot of people are able to just take out time to have a discussion. An open-ended, religious discussion.
I imagine we can kind of figure out like the times of years where most people are active, and like by this time next year, we can figure out a pattern.
It's possible.
I would be ambitious. Well, the few times I've been in here, I've had very little to say. I have things I could talk about, but everyone is a lot smarter than me. So I'm more sit and learn.
It's good philosophy when it comes to that.
As far as Germanic polytheism, the only thing I'm working on right now is I am learning all about the Wolves of Vinland, who are a gang, it turns out. Full-fledged, vicious gang. Unapologetic. They're like a motorcycle club with motorcycles. And I've been investigating these kinds of people for a while, but they're really nuts. They diet. If you join, they diet you. They put you through basically a fitness program. You have to meet fitness formulas to they actually they take the prospects from young white nationalist movements. It's pretty messed up. So what we're looking at here is I saw a video of how they train. And it is full-on mercenary nonsense. Called the Centurion method. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Raising and lowering the hood of the car. Different squats, anger curls. They pull a truck full of cinder blocks, and they do like a monkey bar type thing, but it's 50 feet long. And they have to pull themselves up, and this is ridiculous. They do this every day. They're scary. They're clearly a terrorist organization. It's like they're training themselves to be dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's definitely a thing. It's unfortunate that it is, but it is. I mean, you can spread awareness for the ridiculousness of things and speak out against it, but at a certain point, you got to back away from those people.
Yeah, actually, there's this kind of you don't want to give them free advertisement, right? But at the same time, they're advertising on college campuses. Yeah, and you don't want to fuck with them either. That's the thing. I've been jerked around a little bit in my time, but I don't want to piss anybody important off who might be aggressive. But man, they're advertising on college campuses, and they're very popular. And it's there's not much rhetoric. That's the interesting part. You know, a lot of these weird white nationalist movies are like cargo cults, and it's all about a kind of David Lane-esque scripture, and this is nothing like that. It's just there's no talk. It's just show up and be brutish and scary with the rest of the brutish, scary people. I've never seen anything like it. It's kind of like they're setting up chapters. They're very militia-like as well.
Of course.
Like sleeper cell berserkers.
I mean, no lies. A lot of what they're doing is based around the ideas laid forth with reconstructed Berserk. So yeah, they call themselves werewolves, which I think is prissy, but They're trying to do a reconstructed Berserk type thing. I think minus the mushrooms. I don't know anything about that part of it, but
Reconstructed.
yeah, I mean, a lot of it's taken from non-white nationalists. Like a lot of what they do, as far as the religious end of it, is taken from non-white nationalists, like Skella Grimson, who did a lot of work reconstructing all there is to know about the Berserks. So they're appropriating, but it's weird. They accuse everyone else of appropriating. Like if you're not big and tough and if you're not a manly beefcake like they are, who's willing to throw punches and fight and drink, and they don't want anything to do with you. And also, you should probably read Nietzsche if you join them, I imagine.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
So that's what I'm doing, in small doses, and trying to keep my head down with it, but. I have tracked at least 5 full-fledged chapters, and there may or may not be some connection to the League of the South, which is a really scary group of people. So that's, I don't know. I know that's not exactly religion, but that's something I'm working on.
Yeah, gotcha.
What is the League of the South?
League of the South is an extreme terrorist organization. They're not like the Klan. I mean, they're fully armed. Every single top member has been in prison 3, 4, or 5 times for assault, attempted murder, those kinds of things. They're really aggressive, scary people. And what they've started doing is giving themselves... it's amazing when white nationalist circles, there's tons of crossover, despite it doesn't have anything to do with religion. That's the weird part. So they're not like Ku Klux Klan or anything like that. They wear ski masks and wave the Confederate flag and carry assault rifles, basically. I'm trying to think. They've all started adopting Germanic surnames, or kind of like a baptismal name kind of thing. And so, like, the leader of the League of the South has, like, a Nordic name as a result, even though it probably wasn't the name he was born with. And this was a semi-political move to, like, reach out to a lot of the young, messed up kind of... the young pagan white nationalist folk that are out there. And so there's an unholy alliance forming across the country that's a little bit disconcerting, I guess.
Yeah, fair enough.
To me, these sorts of things are sacrilege. They're an insult to everything that means anything to me. So, constantly tracking and keeping an eye on it and figuring out who supports who, kind of thing. And that's unfortunately for a lot of my friends, it's the chief project for me. A lot of other things are secondary. I just got back from the gym, though.
Nice. It's very important to be healthy.
So, I don't know. I did want to share a couple of things about Germanic polytheism as it's being practiced. In a kind of on the edge of recon. For heathenry, there's a blur between where Reconstructionist stuff ends and where New Age and neo-pagan things begin. Primarily because people are open to Reconstructionist interpretations. People are happy to reincorporate them. Well, not Wicked True. Wicked True would be much further down toward the other end of New Age and Neo-Pagan. So there's a lot of people like me who are fairly well learned, but are basically already have a practice going, and anytime some recon information comes that kind of immediately trumps something I'm already doing, and I just discard something because I like the historical stuff better, kind of thing. And so there's a lot of people like me who are kind of in that limbo area who don't have a fully developed practice or whatever. So in that area, there's this big nebulous range of practices having to do with runes. And all of the reconstructed practices having to do with runes are, there's always an element of from scratch and how they're applied and how they're utilized. But I haven't shared in this room because there's always been much more interesting topics, and it's a very dry topic, but I study esoteric runes. So modern people take these ancient... It may have been that in the ancient past, these ancient letters had concepts tied to them for the development of living life that had to do with magic and ruling and many other things. And these concepts were taught with the letter. So the name of the letter, the sound it made, would be given to a name, and the name would name the concept. So, like, an example would be ride, which is to ride. And it actually has to do with working and going on long, laborious journeys, or swinging a hammer to pound metal, or, basically it has to do with applying effort. And so a concept like that would be tied to a letter, and a letter would be used to demarcate sacred inscriptions that had to do with this. Like you would have the inscription written in runes, and then you would have something like R, 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 as in a set of R's to demarcate the inscription, and then maybe a sigil. And when you look at this practice, and you actually look at how they're written down, this is just alien, really. It's strange to look at, because the practice itself, as it was, is gone. And so people are trying to reconstruct. And as a result, they go every single which way. And what I've done is I've dedicated 2 years to studying everybody's different interpretations. What concepts are they attaching, people actively right now attaching to these letters, and how close do they seem to trend with the evidence provided? And I'm working on a paper right now that's almost finished called The 8 Cryptic Runes. And it's about how these interpretations vary really wildly on some runes. I'm working, of course, with the Elder Futhark, which is what everyone else tends to work with. Elder Futhark are reconstructed themselves. People don't agree on what their names are or what concepts went with them. And so I'm developing a system of my own, because eventually, when you do the work, you run out of road and run out of evidence, and you eventually hit a wall where you gotta go, well, I gotta get creative now. And so I'm in that phase. But I and I think 2 other people have been working on a particular set and a way of fleshing these out, a way to meditate on them, and a way to describe them and chart them. And eventually we'll also have a kind of an interesting system for divination or whatever, but I don't give a crap about that. So there you go. That's what I've been working on, Kevin.
Sweet. My the stuff I've been working on is kind of different. I'd say on the other side of what you're doing. Let me know when you're back.
I can still hear you.
Okay. Just don't like talking to empty air. But whereas you've kind of been contending with the extremist, violent, aggressive people who are distorting your faith specifically, I've been dealing with the general populace, the pagan community as a whole, in small doses, through cups, because that's probably the most active thing here in the area that's regularly attending, and I've looked around. I mean, that's in this general area within a 15, 20-mile radius, and save for a couple of discussion groups that I've attended and helped out at and all that, there's not a whole lot else. Obviously, there's things like Pagan Pride, but I'm very disinclined to go to that because I don't want to have a bunch of shit hawked at me by a bunch of tent women. But that's another story for another day. But so
Dens of thieves.
Dens of thieves, exactly. I got that term tent women from a very old article I read years ago, and it was by a voodoo priest who had interacted with the pagan community, I think in like the 70s or the 80s, and he said it was full of all of these overweight, unhealthy women trying to sell you health cures and things like that, coming out of their tents, trying to sell you cure-alls for every known thing and doing tarot divinations, and all of it was wonky and wishy-washy. So he took to calling these kinds of people that you see at these health fairs and pagan prides and things like that, he took to calling them tent women, and the term stuck. So I use that on occasion, and people are like, what? Sometimes some people are like, I get it. They don't even have to have an explanation. They know what I'm talking about. So that's always fun. But so I mean, I have to kind of deal with the general populace, and the general populace in the pagan community is eclectic, with very little differentiation. It's ironic. They're so differentiated, they're basically the same. There's a point when you become so eclectic that it doesn't matter what you are. It's basically all the same. You incorporate slightly different things, but you don't hold to something specific. You don't have preferences. If you cease having preferences, then anything goes. So, I mean, and I have my own personal bones about that, but I mean, I'm fine with people necessarily doing it, and I've mentioned this many times. I don't want to sound like a broken record. I'd rather that not be the default. And fortunately, the last couple times I've attended some of their meetings and things like that, that idea has been reiterated. I met a few people who were a little leaning more towards traditional things, a few druids, and I met a heathen. But a lot of the people there are eclectic. And I was actually very surprised for two reasons. One, I was surprised that everybody was very open and welcoming to somebody who was a traditionalist. There were a few disparaging remarks being levied against traditionalism and particularly Reconstructionism, which I put to bed. I spoke out and said, no, that's bullshit. I didn't say it in those words. I said it in a much more eloquent way. But they got the point across, and they realized, oh, maybe we should stop being dicks. If we're supposed to be inclusive, we shouldn't just shit on something because it's not what we do. But the thing that really surprised me, and it really kind of took me back, there were several people there who had never heard of polytheistic Reconstructionism, many of which are older than me. They've been in a community for 15 or 20 years longer than me. We're talking older people here who had never heard of that. A whole section, a whole swath of the pagan community they had no exposure to. And I hear people all the time who are really involved in pagan pride. They say, oh, there's plenty of representation of Reconstructionism. Oh, a bunch of people who run it or this and that or whatever. Yeah, that's nice, but do you talk to the people who go? Just walk up to a random person. Hey, have you heard of this tradition? A lot of people don't fucking know. Their exposure is to some kind of like Christopher Penczak-style eclectic solitary neo-pagan witchcraft, basically. That is their exposure to the pagan movement, and not much else. They might have ideas about other things, but not any knowledge about it.
I hold steadfast that if you build something good in your own life, you put it where the other pagan folk can see. And that if you're respectful and you let people know that you want your ideas respected because they're sacred to you, you explain why they're sacred. You know what? I've noticed that people, it will not give them the impetus to follow you. They're not going to want to do what you do. But they will consult you. They will respect what you do. And they'll see it as having, it gives pagans a sense that there is heritage involved. That there is something for them to reach back in time and grasp. Something that was taken from them in some respect. And if you represent, I think if you just represent it well, eventually you get people, if they're truly inclusive people and not just dismissive people, if they're truly inclusive, they will respect it. And that's actually what you want. You want that good PR. You want people to respect it. And I think that's actually been my whole concern with the white nationalism thing, is because I think that it'll cause people not to respect it, and rightfully so. But
Absolutely.
it's the same thing. If you're representing and people see that it's wholesome and good, to add structure to their own life, but what you can do is give them a kind of rock to build things on. They know that you're out there doing whatever. They might get curious. And all you need is, I'd say, if 1 in 20 pagans by the end of my lifetime had at least some exposure to recon, I'd be happy with it. Because, as you said, I mean, I got a lot of friends who function as tent women, so I know how all that jazz works. And I don't mind when they're crafters, whenever they're making stuff that's fantastic from, by hand. All that stuff is awesome. But I think a lot of the people who go, and the stereotype of the overweight female witch with a house full of cats, wearing black and burning black candles. I have people in my family like that, so I know very intimately that it's out there. Whenever I think you're on the right track. All you've got to do is represent, and I think if you do it with patience, and it will require a whole lifetime of patience, but if you do it with patience, I think you'll gain the I think recon will gain the respect it deserves. It'll be the well of knowledge for every other pagan person.
I'm just trying to make sense of the long haul, right? Each week that passes, getting closer and closer to it. I've had more chance to refine everything, and now I have it down to 2 pages. I would have a book on the side for reading hymns and everything, but I got the primer down, easy to follow, bold letters for them to pronounce, italic for me, instructions are in regular typeface, and titles are in underline in a much bigger font. So I have it like solid, centered on the paper and everything, so it would be very easy for me to print that out. I'll probably make a laminated copy for myself. Everything else is easy peasy. I've done this for 8 years, and I've had opportunities to present before to people who have asked me, have requested, and this was no different. I didn't beg or plead. I didn't even insinuate. She actually asked me. One of the group leaders asked me, and all of them have come on board and wanted me to do it. I'm just thinking to myself, like, they're very enthusiastic about it. Like, I added my own things to the event description on the website, And she added a thing in the beginning kind of introducing me and how they were very excited about it and they want to learn more about recon and more about ancient history in general. And I do think that it's a great opportunity, but I'm thinking to myself, okay, I do it, I have a good time, then what? A handful of people have a better understanding of things. Perhaps they discuss it with their friends and see, oh, so there is actually a thing like this, and this is what it's like. So maybe it spreads a little bit of awareness. A few people pay attention and maybe have a better respect for recons. They don't just think that we're all just rigid, and they just don't think we're assholes to be assholes or whatever. We have concerns for a reason. We're not just being assholes for its own sake. But then what? You know, I mean, chances are I'm not going to gather anybody specifically who's going to do what I'm going to do. So I'm just educating people. And I've done that for fucking 15 years. Since I first started in the pagan community, I've been educating other people because I took the time and energy to actually research things. And I remember being 18 or 19 years old and knowing more about the community than people who were 10 years my senior. And I'm come backing around to that, and I know more than people 10 years my senior as well, because I spend the time. The person I talked to was 56 years old, and he had never even heard the word Reconstructionist. I just blew me away that he never heard of it. And he was a very bright guy, very, very sharp, and very involved, very social. I had just... So I'll be honest, I feel a little tortured by current events because I'm getting all this amazing luck that's moving in the direction of my friends, my heathen friends, because I have a number of them, quite a few. At the same time that I'm trying to spread awareness for what I'm doing, and there's a group 60 miles away from me that's just way too far out of sync with it. I don't live there. I don't want to live there. I don't want to live near LA. It's there, but it's just not reasonable for me to attend that because it's way too far for me to do 120 miles round trip for one thing, for one night. The gas alone would just completely, yeah, it would be a burden to me to drive out there. Not to mention the traffic in the area.
You grab some hospitality. That's what we do when we go to visit each other. We just stay at each other's houses.
Fair enough, but once again, I'd rather have something out here, and that's what I've been trying to do. But it's honestly like pulling teeth. What got me to actually attend this CUPS organization was a presentation that discussed the Greek agricultural year and how the ancient Greeks organized their festivals around their agricultural cycles. And when I eventually talked to the lady who presented, she is not a recon or doesn't want to use the term to describe herself. I meet a bunch of people who are kind of Greek-ish, like they have a theme like that. Maybe they're not necessarily an eclectic, but like, does Hellenismos have something on its face that I'm not aware of? Because it's like people are like, no, I want to kind of hang out here. I'm not going to be a complete eclectic. I'm not going to, ooh, recon scary. Ooh, hide under bed. Every time I meet somebody who says, oh, I am a devotee of this Greek deity, or I'm very passionate about Greek mythology, and I ask them, you ever heard of Hellenismos? What?
Yeah.
What the fuck? What the fuck? What is so scary? And I'm going to tell you, categorically speaking, when I meet somebody who is either very new to Hasatru or has never even heard of it but has an interest in Norse, those people always end up going to recon eventually. In my experience, every single person I've ever met who was interested in Norse eventually gravitates to full-on Hasatru or heathenry or something like that.
We have an infrastructure.
You do.
There's a lot of already there stuff.
But for some reason, it's just a ridiculous minority of people, despite the fact that Greek mythology is ubiquitous and extremely popular. Most people I meet that are interested in Greek mythology stay into the category of Greek pagan. And they stay there forever, the rest of their life. And then there's this tiny little trickle of people who break away from that, like, oh, I could do tradition now.
Wait, what's a Greek pagan?
It's just a general term to describe somebody who's not a Reconstructionist or considers himself a traditional polytheist, largely because the term pagan doesn't really... most Hellenists don't even like the term. We necessarily consider ourselves pagan. That's a lot of recons feel that way as well. I look at it this way. I think the pagan community is a community and not an identity. It doesn't represent my beliefs. And attempts that some people have made to say, oh, all these beliefs in pagan religions are identical in some way, or they all follow these specific formula, I resent that. So for me, it's more of a social thing, a networking thing, and maybe a subculture, but not an identity, not a religion in of itself. So I don't use it as a religious identity, and many other people I know don't.
So,
I use the term Greek pagan to describe somebody who isn't doing full-on Hellenismos. That hasn't put the time, effort, and commitment into doing Hellenismos. They're loosely into Hellenic shit.
They have like a generic kind of paganistic standard, and then you put your own kind of shell on it, whether it be Greek or maybe Egyptian or whatever, or I guess
exactly
whatever. You just kind of put over this shell without being authentic. Because I knew somebody who she was just kind of like kind of like a generic pagan, spiritual, whatever. But she would often go to a Hindu temple, even though she wasn't a Hindu. But she would like utilize that venue to kind of connect to, I guess, her whatever tradition or faith or whatever. So it's kind of like that idea of like a co-opting authentic tradition,
or at least thought out.
You take the pretty bits to express yourself. It's more about inward expression versus like an actual devotion.
And cherry picking.
Right. That's the word I was thinking. Cherry picking. That's a good one.
Yeah, they cherry pick it, and then they get extremely upset and butthurt when you say, "There's a tradition here, and there are specifics." No specifics. I can't deal with specifics. How dare you? You're horrible and hateful because you do something traditional. How dare you? That's my experience on a regular basis when I mention it. It's very frustrating.
I want a sad picture of your face. I'm going to put it to the music. Lonely, oh, so lonely.
To be fair, though, I mean, it is a smaller tradition in general. Even if I was to look at the numbers, Asatru is a very large polytheistic tradition. I would argue that it's the most successful Reconstructionist tradition that exists in the West. I mean, Hellenismos is up there for sure. It's probably one of the third or fourth maybe. But in numbers, Asatru is much larger. And there's a bunch of people I know. Shit, I know a Hellenic person who's also a Hindu, and she lives in fucking Alaska. So I mean, there's a bunch of people who just don't even. It's not even a thing. They don't even have an opportunity to form anything. But I live in a nice state. There's quite a bit of people, and a bunch of the people in the LA group have, given me a lot of encouragement, and they would love to see another group crop up out my way, so there would be a little bit more overlap, So I could send people their way, and they can send them mine, and I've actually sent a few people their way that live closer to LA. I've let them know about the group. I've done that in that service, So it just seems very strange, this kind of situation that I run into with people. There's like they're hiding or something. But I don't know. We'll see.
Why don't you go there for like a week and have them put you up? And then, put them up someday.
Do you talk about the people from the LA group?
Yeah.
No, no, it's just not worth it. I wouldn't want to do it, and I have other shit to do. I have other obligations. It's just not practical. Yeah, I don't work, but I have other things. I'm going to doctor's appointments. I have networking schedules. I volunteer. I have commitments with friends and family that I regularly do. I'm having dinners with family on a regular basis. I'm helping out my brother. I'm helping out my friends. So, no. It's just not practical.
Not
and
even
it's not,
as a vacation?
Huh?
Not even as a vacation?
I'm going to tell you right now, fuck you. LA is not a vacation. It's a hell. That's what LA is. It's a shithole. So no.
Vacation to LA. Actually, it might be a vacation to me, but I also live in a really shithole tiny town, so.
Fair enough.
I have to poke fun at your grumpiness. I think it's my job, actually.
It kind of is your job. I think it's a part of your job description for certain. The City of Death, very nice word. Instead of the City of Angels is the City of Death. The Messengers of Death. What is that? Los Angelos de Muertos? Or something? Don't ask me, I don't speak Spanish.
So I'm growing a magnificent beard.
Yes, it is quite magnificent. Very nice.
It makes me sad when it gets peanut butter in it, though.
The mortal enemy of beards, peanut butter.
Well, welcome to the club.
Exactly.
There is no good club that doesn't have beards in it.
Very true.
I watched this video. It's pretty funny. Maybe I'll put it in the chat. It's by this Sikh guy that lives in my city, and he's pretty popular on YouTube. And he made it was like, I don't know if it was like an actual number, but it was something like 10 reasons why beards are just better. And there are all these obscure reasons, like, for one, you don't look like a little boy or a woman. So for that reason alone, it's good to have a beard. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's a valid point. Being proud of my gender.
Fair enough. You should post a video.
Try to find.
I think that before Kevin dies, he's going to accidentally start a heathen group, another heathen group, and a druid group. Before he ever starts.
If I accidentally create a Kemetic group, I'll just be like, fuck it, I'm done. Because then at that point, it's clear that somebody up there is fucking with me. No, but once again, though, it is good. I've been able to, network and help out people, give people resources, and I do definitely enjoy it. It's just, It's it's fucking like a sick joke, you know. I fucking hate being the butt of a joke when it comes to that. When it comes to fate, you know, way things kind of end up, you know. But I don't know. I mean, all in all, I mean, it might end up stirring some interest by just having it there. I mean, a lot of these groups, you have 10 or 15 people who attend something, right? And a bunch of those might be regulars, and maybe there's a couple of others that are added in there. But the whole group, like a lot of these online groups that meet somewhere physically, the online group has a bunch of people in it, you know, like several hundred people in some cases. So, and those people know these people who know these people who know these people. I mean, there's connections that you're not even fucking aware of, right? So, chances are, even if none of people in that group do something like what I do or whatever, there is a chance that the fact that it's listed there would garner interest. Oh, that was a thing? Oh, I missed that. I have a friend who's into such and such, or a friend of a friend who's in such and such, or I myself is into it. So it may have unintended consequences that would be favorable somewhere down the line. Yeah, so we'll see.
Might accidentally start a Zoroastrian group too.
You know what? Sit on it and rotate. Fucking dick. Bullshit. That's all I gotta say.
I had a question with Zoroastrians.
Oh.
So, oh, wait 1 second. Sorry. I have a video playing. Sorry. My headphones. So, like, I went to high school with a lot of Persians. So I grew up with a lot of Zoroastrians. I know a lot about them, but I was too young to, like, ask them questions. So now I'm very curious. Because a lot of times you hear about Zoroastrians not allowing converts. And, like, obviously at one time they did. But they weren't allowed converts, and it always traces back to the Zoroastrians in India because of the laws that were placed upon them about proselytizing, and that's why it became the tradition that, like, they don't proselytize. But then I was wondering, but, like, what about all the Zoroastrians, all the Persian Zoroastrians in Iran? Like, they weren't in India, so they weren't under this law. So do, like, the Zoroastrians in Iran, do they allow converts? I don't know. So does anybody know? I was curious. Do you hear what I'm saying, though?
Yeah, and I'm actually doubly curious about Zoroastrians in Iran and their relationship to the Iranian regime in general. Like, I'm actually curious about that whole topic. Like, how do they're obviously allowed to coexist to some degree. You know, what is the nature of that? You know,
I know about the Jews in Iran, but I don't know about the Zoroastrians. All the Zoroastrians I knew live in Canada.
So,
Yeah. See. So basically, what I'll just read what Ruben's saying for the viewing audience. He's saying, where should I start? Iranis fully accept and promote conversions. Is the Hindu imposition on the Parsis does not apply to Iranis, especially Kurds who actively convert people, even in Sweden. James, they are largely tolerant and to a certain extent respected. There are ongoing conversions to Zoroastrian in Iran, though they must be done in secret. In Iraqi Kurdistan, there are open conversions. It's spreading in response to Daesh. I didn't know there's a lot of. Sorry, I was going to say I didn't know there's a lot of Zoroastrian Kurds.
Yeah. Does the Ayatollah of Iran have any particular specific pronouncements on how Zoroastrian is to be treated? I would need to know what it looks.
Well, there's this weird aspect about Zoroastrianism because there's in Islam there are three faiths that are like protected because they're considered to be Abrahamic faiths, and like the general consensus amongst the majority of at least the Middle Eastern and North African schools of thoughts that they are the Jews, the Christians, and the Mandeans. Though some people debate the Mandeans, but that's okay. But there are authentic hadiths that both the Sunnis and the Shias accept that, to a certain extent, include Zoroaster as an authentic prophet that came before the other prophets of Islam and of the Jews as well. So there is an aspect of where Zoroastrianism is kind of included as being a kind of quasi-cousin monotheistic religion. So in some aspects they're often just protected. So that's why in Iran, there are like full Zoroastrian temples and they do their pilgrimage and stuff. I'm not saying they have full religious freedom, but they like exist. They're there. They're not like destroyed like they would be under like ISIS or even under like under Saddam Hussein or somebody. But so they're there, and obviously they've been there for thousands of years. So the Iranian government, the Shia, maybe it's just under like the Shia logic, they have like a kind of affinity, just because it's part of their more so their national heritage, and they kind of can justify it based off of these some sources within Islam that justify Zoroastrian being an authentic line in the prophetic monotheistic traditions throughout the world. So in Iran, at least, they make that exception, but I can't say that about other Islamic sects. But I know there are some that do see Zoroastrianism or Zoroaster as being part of that kind of like the grouping of authentic faith traditions. There are also Manichaeans in Iran.
Body as well.
I think that's the only place where there's like a full functioning Manichaean church or temple or whatever in the world. Is in Iran, in Tehran. Yeah, exactly. It's definitely tiny, but it's there. That's religion I want to know more about.
I'm really curious about like I mean, I hate to say it, but the politics of that. Because I know that the Baha'i faith exists out in Iran, but they get a lot of flack.
Oh, they get killed in Iran. They get hung, like hunted down. Like no joke. I remember because like again, like I went to high school with a bunch of Persians, and there's like when I was in high school, this is probably maybe 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, but like just about. And I remember like they had like there's like this table setting out and talking about because there's this like group of like I don't know something like 15 Baha'is that were just randomly taken by the government, and they were talking about. And I remember this booth, and they're talking about it, and like a week later, they're all 15 were hung, and I remember seeing the video of them, and it's crazy. But I think it's like one of the only like face in Iran that happens like constantly. In Pakistan, it's like that with the Ahmadiyya Muslims, whereas like they have Christians there who are more, I would say, heretics to Islam than Ahmadiyyas are. But they're killing the Ahmadiyyas, and it's the same thing with in Iran. Like in Iran, they have like they have Jews there, and like on more circumstances, I would say that I would disagree with Islam more than a Baha'i would. But Baha'is are getting killed in Iran, and Jews aren't. It's this weird. It has nothing to do with religion. Obviously, it's purely political, I think. Oh, but I guess then again, Baha'is aren't protected under the tenets of Islam, because there might be an apostate faith.
Hey, John's here. Welcome, buddy. Long time, brother. So there's kind of for Islam, there's kind of, when it comes to legitimacy, there's a kind of pedigree that traces faiths to a kind of Abrahamic origin or some step in the development of monotheism that is seen as, I guess, pedigree is the only word I can think of to describe it, like something's more legitimate, protected under the tenets. You mentioned a couple of hadiths protecting Zoroastrianism. That's very interesting to me.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's even like Islamic scholars that even group Buddha in like to that group because it says in Islamic tradition. I'm not a Muslim, but like in Islam, I know in Islamic tradition it says that prophets were given to all the nations of the world, and it says it also gives. I think also there's some hadiths that give a listing of how many actual prophets were given throughout the entirety of mankind. And then you have like all these theories. So like, oh, is Buddha an actual prophet of Islam? Is Krishna, is like the original teachings of Krishna, was he an actual prophet of Islam? Was Zoroaster? Like you have all these things that like it's very interesting, and it's mainly reflected. You see it mainly, or at least I have seen it mainly reflected based off of where the scholars are from. So you see like South Asian scholars promoting like the idea of Buddha or Krishna being a possible prophet of Islam. You see Iraqi and Iranian Shia scholars saying Zoroaster was a possible prophet of Islam kind of idea. So you see like the cultural aspect playing into it, but the faith tradition, at least among the four major branches of Islam, definitely allow for incorporating other faith traditions that aren't necessarily Judaism, Christianity, or Sabbatianism or Mandeanism into the fold of being authentic, what they would say authentic faith traditions. They seem to have like that play, that the elasticity of history and theology.
Kevin is stroking his beard meticulously.
Just my mustache at the moment, so. Yeah, exactly. So how about that local sports team?
How about this here weather?
Yeah, it's definitely definitely weird.
I think
Yeah,
the most.
we had
Go ahead.
rain here. We had rain here, so it was something else.
I think the most interesting dialogue I had here, it got cut short because there were so many people. The most interesting dialogue I had here was there was someone named Idol Smasher here, and there were a few Christians in the room, and somebody asked me to. I don't know if it was the Easter edition. Somebody asked me to. They said that polytheism was completely beyond them, and they couldn't connect it to their own experience. And so I had to think on my feet, and there was a discussion about. I'm trying to think. There was about. I brought up the transcendental element where faiths tend to come together. Yeah. That was fascinating. I would like to talk to more people who are like interested in a serious exchange of like. And I know this is a shaky thing for people in different religions to do, especially when they're very dedicated to their religious path. But I am interested in the kind of one-to-one experience, the way people experience God, what it subjectively is like, right? If there is even a subjectivity to it at all. And for some, there isn't. And then see if there's anything like that in my own path or in any of the paths I've been on before. And then see where the difference is and where the similarities are. But I know that for human experience there must be bridges there, even though we're very, very different and our approaches are different, our philosophies are different.
I can see value in that.
No, I don't say that. I only mean to say that one, at least momentarily, may have some kind of subjective experience of some aspect of God or a God or something of the like. And I've noticed that at least at some level of experience, subjectivity itself feels like it collapses, and that seems to be universal.
Can I interject? Does that am I being presumptuous in assuming that you're thus saying there could be no such thing as collective experiences of the, I don't know what the right word would be, I guess the divine? If you're saying it's completely subjective, could there not be collective experiences?
I don't know. I'm not actually making.
Fair enough. I was just asking.
There could be subjective experiences, or there could be some universal thing, maybe in the divine, or more likely for me, rationally speaking, from the point of view of how humans are. There might be something more universal within the human itself, and the divine. Maybe the divine isn't all one, if you like. I don't think it is. But maybe something about the way we connect to divinity is universal, I think. And like I was saying, is everybody seems to report if there's enough intense focus and concentration, the collapse of their own point of view, if you like. The bottom drops out of experience. There's no self. There's no. There feels to be no subjective experience. Yeah, ego death, if you like. And this seems to be a feature of interacting with the divine that is universal, even if faiths do different things with the experience or direct the energy of that experience towards different goals and means. I don't think the divine is one, but I do think that this aspect of humans is. I think that everybody does have this in common, that certain ways or means of experiencing the divine is common. Even if it's from, I guess, different angles would be the best way to say it. Different channels in the mind and in the spirit and within experience. But I think there is something universal there.
Could I would like to quote somebody, a person who brought me to my current faith tradition, who passed away 7 years ago. He said there are, you'd always say this so often, and it's like resonated with me for so long, but he'd say there's 6.5 billion religions in the world. Like that's the true aspect of what it means to, and I'm going to have to use monotheistic sayings because this is how he taught it to me. But there's those are the true religions of God. Is the personal experience, is the striving on the day-to-day. That is your liturgy. That is your prostrations towards God. Is your personal experience And it's righteousness is when that personal experience and that striving through the day-to-day is focused towards the true end goal, and lack of righteousness is when it's selfishness. That's true sin kind of idea. So he's saying, like, when he was saying that and emphasizing that idea, like there isn't really major faith traditions. There's truly 6 billion different religions, and the essence of righteousness and sin is consistency and truth and selflessness versus selfishness, egotism, and essentially self-destruction. But yeah, sorry, just been thinking about that for a while.
That's very poignant.
I liked.
I'm going to go to the kitchen real quick. Be right back.
Interfaith.
Now that he's gone, let's have the more fun, fascinating conversation, and we'll just come back to talking about boring things when he gets here. So I think a lot of people, it's weird. I've noticed that a lot of different monotheistic faiths, at the moment where you lose ego, they feel that either that is a direct oneness with God, or that that's the presence of God, or that they're experiencing some aspect of God, or that they're in like the kingdom of God, like they're getting a taste of it or something like that.
The Holy Spirit.
Or that's God, or that's God itself.
I could clarify from a Torah Jewish-based perspective on that aspect. So in this sense, so what's different, so the big thing about monotheistic religions that all theistic religions don't kind of get, not get as in they don't understand, but doesn't exist in the realm, is the biggest conflict is basically whose God is more one. Like, who's a truer monotheistic tradition? Like, that's the argument that any monotheistic tradition has with each other, is like, who is essentially like the biggest, baddest, essentially oneness of one God. And when it gets into the idea of religion, then, where Judaism stands alone is that it doesn't put hold in systematic theology or dogma necessarily. Obviously, the idea of monotheism is central to the faith and to the world outlook, but it's really dependent on what people do. So, like, the wording you use, like the kingdom of God, and like kind of like having an aspect of the divine, is very Christian language. It's very it's very non-existent in a Hebraic mindset. The idea of the kingdom of God is essentially when people are not selfish. The idea of egotism, like if you read the prophets, the idea of destruction, the idea of the messianic age isn't when there's streets paved with gold, or you have rivers of wine and virgins, or you have kind of harps and angels. The kingdom, quote unquote kingdom of God, for a Jewish perspective, is when people are not spending billions of dollars on, like sporting events and wars, and are curing cancer. And we eradicate AIDS because, it only takes a few $1 billion when you have one prince in Saudi Arabia who's worth $50 billion by himself, and nobody can spend $50 billion. So if he were to give up, let's say 75% of his income just to AIDS research alone, it would eradicate AIDS. And that's the aspect of destruction of egotism in relation to the Messianic age, is when people kind of click and are saying like, oh, you're a human being, you're my brother. It's the idea of going to work and passing by a homeless person would be kind of like it should be like a mind-boggling, like disgusting event. Like the idea of saying like, I have shoes and you can't eat anything, that shouldn't happen. Like that's the idea of the kingdom of God for a Jew. It has nothing to do with like, it's not an ethereal kind of nirvana-like concept. That's like, I think, more influenced by other cultures, but I could get into that later. But ours is very materialistic. It's very much like the very kind of logical understanding of the world where it's just like borders, nationalism. It makes no sense. Like it's ridiculous. Like selling water. Like all these concepts is what the prophets of the Bible talked about. They're saying like this stuff will stop because it just makes no sense. And for a Jew, that's the idea of like destructive egotism. It's not really getting closer with God. It's not really kind of like bringing about a better place on earth. It's just like reversing the natural order. It's just like doing the logical thing. So like right now we view ourselves in like kind of like a devolved state, and the next stage of a human evolution, it won't be necessarily biological or even intellectual. It'll just be like on the standpoint where there will be no concept of xenophobia, bigotry, racism, and nationalism, all these barriers that create war, famine, destruction, diseases, and poverty. And that's the Jewish understanding of destruction of ego. It's not really on a personal level, but it's more on a societal level. Everything has to do with the society or the national level or the global level. We don't really believe in personal religions. We're more of like a community outlook. So the destruction of ego has to do with like the destruction of a nation's ego, not just a person's ego. But that's radically different than in Islam and in Christianity, that's for sure.
Would you agree then, and since I have Reuven in the room as well, would you agree with the phrase, and I've heard it used 3 times this year in 3 different contexts from Jewish folk, would you agree with the phrase that, from your perspective, God is like a verb, it's something you do?
In a sense, so an argument, I think, like I kind of brought about before about the aspect of like when monotheist talks, it's usually based on the idea of the essence of God and how God doesn't have an essence, kind of one-upping each other, and like obviously the aspect of the mono aspect of the theism. So and obviously I have my bias, so from a Jew's perspective, the reason why I think, at least out of the other 2 traditions, the main traditions, is that the reason why our God is a truest, the mono in our God is the biggest, is the sense that we never define or describe God. The only time in the Jewish tradition that we ever describe or define God is in relation to what God is not, or the fact that God is one, right? So then you have all these other aspects about saying God is just and merciful and all these things, and we would, a truthful Jew would never say that God is just. We don't say God's loving. We don't say God's merciful. We don't say God is slow to anger, or we don't say God is, you know, I don't know, strong or everlasting, or not everlasting, strong or steadfast. We don't really believe those are aspects of God. We have a commandment. We have 613 commandments. One of the commandments are to walk in the ways of God, and how are you to walk in the ways of God? So the way we fulfill that commandment is the way that God's described in the Torah. So the rationality is the attributes that are described in the Torah isn't who God is, but who a human's supposed to be. So in that way, God is reflective. Like the ideal human is reflective of God, because descriptions of God in the Torah aren't actually describing God, but they're utilized so that humans are supposed to know how they're at. So when it says that God's just or merciful or slow to anger or forgiving to the next generation, that has nothing to do with the creator of the universe, the supreme intellect. It's supposed to be who humans supposed to be. We're supposed to, in that way we're supposed to be God. So when we read the text and when we see how God acts, we're supposed to emulate that. We don't emulate prophets. We don't emulate messengers. We don't emulate priests. We emulate God. And the descriptions of God have nothing to do with God, the creator, but it has to do with who humans are supposed to be. So that's how we are reflective of the divine.
That was a knowledge bomb. I just learned a lot in a very brief period of time. All right, guys, I'm going to have to get out for now. I promise at some point I will tell you all about runes, but it's a very dry topic, so yeah. Peace.
Take care.
I'm actually going to take a shower, so I will be awake too. Never mind, I decided to take one in the morning. Oh, Kevin. What's the okay? So the context was right now my city's holding the Pan Am Games, the Pan American Games, and so like a lot of the distinct neighborhoods are kind of like have like extra whatever the decorations and stuff, and I was on the actually no, where was it? It doesn't really matter where it was now I think about it. But I saw a statue, and it was of the Mesopotamian goddess that's holding two snakes. Who is that? It was like a full-on statue, but it was like painted in rainbow colors. Oh, because it was in the gay district. So but like it was like full-on. Like I know I've seen it on like coins and stuff. It was like a woman holding the snake in each hand. But she was like painted like a clown. Obviously, that had nothing to do with it.
Did she have exposed breasts?
Yeah, I think she had a mermaid body, but I could be wrong. But I remember from like the waist up, it was like a woman, and she had like kind of like locked hair. It was like flowing hair, but it's kind of like locks, and very like bulbous eyes.
And yeah, bulbous eyes, and from the waist down, she has a conical body, like she's wearing a dress.
Yeah, I couldn't really make it out, but yeah, kind of something like that.
It's likely the Minoan snake goddess.
Right. Okay. I knew it wasn't just some random statue, and I've seen it before. I knew like they painted it like very weirdly rainbow and obscure, but like the basic shape I remember.
There's a whole mythological association behind that. The earlier Minoan civilization, obviously, they had ideas that helped to form the later Greek myths, and some of the societies in the Minoan period would have been more influenced by female rule. It's been suggested that some aspects of Minoan society may have been matriarchal in conception, but the sort of Minoan snake goddess Part of the reason why it looks very similar, it seems almost Mesopotamian, is because it's been associated with Ishtar and Astarte as these Near Eastern goddesses of sex and war. It's this very powerful, almost Amazonian figure. And she's associated oftentimes with the mythologies behind the labyrinth. And there's a symbol, a double-headed axe. It's called the labrys, and it was used by Theseus to kill the bull, the Minotaur, in the labyrinth. And that symbol actually traces back to the Minoans. And yes, you're right, Reuben. They may have gotten a lot of these symbolisms directly from the Sumerians at one point, if not from the Babylonians by proxy. So, well, you're wondering why the fuck is this in the gay district? A lot of this sort of like feminism and things like that, it dovetails with a lot of historical studies, and as I'm sure you're probably aware, there's a number of Wicca-type influence paths and paganism that were very focused on sort of feminism and the sacred goddess and things like that. So they all kind of mix and mingle together, and basically it's a sort of mythology of lesbians, really. That's what this all kind of comes down to. The labrys, even though it can be used as a symbol, and I've even used it as a symbol, quite ironically, there are actually pendants with these that you can buy of the double-headed axe. It's also very often used as a symbol for lesbian sexuality.
The cult of the snake. Sorry.
The cult of the snake and the sort of this sacred sexuality, these powerful female figures from a time that, you know, to more radical feminists would have been considered less patriarchal, less influenced by males, male sexuality, male authority, male spirituality, such like that. So there's these mythologies that have been sort of adopted into the LGBT community, into women's rights communities, and things like that. It's not necessarily these people are actually worshiping the Minoan snake goddess. It suggests that would be laughable, but they are incorporating a sort of mythology around these figures that tie into alternative sexuality in some form.
It's the cult of the sacred vagina, where essentially what the religion is feminism, and what they do is you go back in history and you go through various cults and religions and you pick the strongest woman, and that's your representative. So you go back into Christianity and you say like, oh no, Mary Magdalene, she was a real apostle. Or then you like also, I went to high school with people like this, so I just remember this. Or like you would have like an altar where you'd have like maybe like Isis and then Aphrodite and Kali, and this is a true faith because they're women. They're strong, powerful women. And the mother goddess, she's the original faith. And I remember having these arguments with people for so long about this like ridiculous concept of the mother goddess like proto-human cult that like, I don't know if you know about this, but like it's like people have this idea where like the essence of human relationship to the divine was directly relationship to the worship of a mother goddess.
Wicca. Period.
Yeah, it's like I can't get my mind around it, and like it's nothing to do with like an objection to the idea of a female deity, but it's a rewriting of history and just saying like, oh no, that's not the real history. That's just like history that's been distorted by man, kind of idea.
Well, fortunately, that view has been kicked to the curb by and large, for a variety of reasons. Main reason is like using Wicca as the example, or any type of contemporary witchcraft. There's both a god and a goddess, a lord and a lady. Many of my friends have explained this to me over the years. So to say that the goddess is the female representation of deity is the only thing that matters is to completely discount male experience. And the earlier traditions, the ones coming out of the 1800s, and that started and were developing after the witchcraft ban was lifted in Britain and a lot of other areas in Western Europe, it's to completely discount the influence. I mean, for fuck's sake, Gerald Gardner was the fucking founder of Wicca. He was a man. You know, but you have these people like Dianic Wiccans who want to just completely rewrite things and say that there's an old religion and it was Mother Goddess. And it's one thing to have this as a personal Gnostic interpretation, or this is how your religion interprets it, but to say that that is historical fact is beyond disingenuous. It's offensive. And I agree with you completely. And I've dealt with these people many times over the years and their associations with things. And I meet people on a regular basis like that. Like at one of the groups I attended, well, it was just one of the groups, the main group that I'm sort of participating in. When I explained some of my beliefs to one of the older ladies who was there, she was talking about, oh yeah, well, I also worship Artemis. And she prefers the Artemis of Ephesus. And I already knew what that was to begin with, so I didn't even need to have it explained. The Artemis of Ephesus, there's a number of these statues that are out there. But it's basically a really complicated statue of Artemis where the chest area is covered in breasts, multiple breasts. 10, 15, 20 breasts. There's different versions of the statue with different colorations and things like that. And there are things around her and headdresses and different garments, and the way the face is structured is different to a lot of the traditional depictions. But that was only one of several different depictions of Artemis that would have existed. And there's various different epithets and different forms of any of the deities that we could mention in ancient Greece. But as we mentioned earlier, when James is in here, there's a bunch of people who just like to cherry pick. But they're not honest about the material, and those people just, that make me shake my head.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to call it a night. It was a pleasure. Thanks for the conversation. Glad I got to be a part of it this week.
Good, I'm glad you were able to come.
If you will. Have a good night, Ruben. Bye, Kevin.
Take care.